Welcome to Beyond the Game. My name is Gregan, and today I'm chatting with Damascus, known for their fighting game commentary.
Fighting games are harsh. First of all, when you lose, you can only blame yourself. Believe me, being in fighting games, most people never blame themselves. They'll blame you, they'll say your character is stupid, they'll say it was laggy. Not offering you this coping mechanism is already like hard on you.
Why do you think fighting game has turned into this communal thing where all the FGC comes together in one place?
I think the very practical first reason to not sugarcoat it is there aren't many fighting games that are big enough to run a massive event on its own.
Do you feel like the FGC gets a bit of a weird reputation?
It's a bit weird to me, right? Because so there's this thing, and it's actually like in parts obviously not a major thing, but that there is a part of the FGC who's like, oh, esports suck. We don't want to be esports. But that's true because there are a lot of people in the FGC who see esports as this big thing where money is invested, but identity is removed from it. And then you have Reinhardt. Reinhardt used to be homeless and would literally just have like one 50p and go to the arcade and put the 50p, and if you lose, you can't play anymore. So he became strong like this. But that's because like fighting games are a bit more inclusive. And I think at the variety of profiles and storylines you get on fighting games, there is no other like gaming environment that has this depth of stories and of profiles in players.
Make sure to follow for future episodes and let us know who you want to hear from next. I hope you enjoy this conversation as we get to know Damascus beyond the game. Well, Damascus, it's good to have you here. I was excited to have you on the podcast because fighting game community is one that I was very lucky to work in with the Street Fighter team at Vitality. And I learned a lot about it through people like yourself and all the other amazing people. And I think it's one of the most unknown beauties within the gaming space is the fighting game community and how they get involved in things, how they continue to keep putting their love and their soul into the games that they've been playing for decades. First off, I want to ask you, what is it that makes the fighting game community so special?
Fighting games community is unique because it's one of the only kind of gaming space. It's a very like little niche within gaming space where people actively thrive to go meet each other to play. Like in a world today where most of the games you play, it's online, you're on Discord with the guys, with your friends, you're having fun on like whatever Valorant, Rocket League, Overwatch, whatever you play. You don't really have a need to go meet your League of Legends friends or everything. You might go and like chill in a bar or whatever, but unless you go to a big LAN, you're not going to go in person and play League of Legends with your friends, right? Fighting games, that's what they give you. Like fighting games give you that whole, you kind of yearn to like go in a place with people and meet your friends and get to play. It creates rivalries. And more importantly, it kind of creates that thing where no matter whether you know the person or not, the simple act of sitting down next to a person, playing, that's it. You at least made an acquaintance, not a friend yet. You get to meet so many people. You get to come back. And that's like one of the main arguments for me is that it being one of the very few pure 1v1 competitive gaming, right? Most of the competitive gaming space today is team-based. Fighting games are 1v1. It's just you versus your opponent. It just creates that thing where you want to just go out, meet everyone, meet the competition. You make so many friends. And that whole offline ecosystem that fighting games have is so unique. That's one of the main trademarks of it. And that comes from like the sources of it, right? Fighting games used to be arcades. You would go put your coin in and play. It's pretty much the same now, but with consoles.
Yeah, the offline ecosystem is one that I think every esport should be looking to try and develop more of. We were speaking beforehand about how I'm involved in the Pokemon trading card game world, and we have locals where we go along, play every week, and then we go along to bigger events, travel around the country for medium-sized events, and then travel overseas to regionals where hundreds of people turn up and all play against each other. And typically these kind of ecosystems are done through self-funding. And this is one of those weird ones where esports now is becoming so professionalized with lots of money around, but there's not really a huge amount of money to go around. And so there's this whole bubble problem. And the fighting game community has created this, I don't want to say stable system because, a fighting game community struggles as much as any community with funding. But you created this system where people pay for their hobby, which it's weird to say that in esports because esports typically people are getting paid to do their hobby. How important do you think it is that for the whole of esports and gaming, we learn to partake in our hobbies and pay for ourselves in those hobbies?
I think it's super important because one of the biggest strengths for the fighting games, as you said, is not only do people like pay for their hobby, people are involved, right? Like for me, I think the best example I have is when Rocket League came out, right? I started being really invested in Rocket League, still am, love the game. But my biggest shock when I arrived in Rocket League is, when do I see people? I don't. We just play online. Okay, when do I get to meet actual high-level players? Oh, I don't. They're in a sponsored team and like they play RLCS and, I'm never going to get to meet them. And because of this, what it creates a community that is very fragmented. Like it's like groups of friends and groups of friends and groups of friends. As a result, you just have stuff where people don't really know each other and like they play in groups of friends. And fighting games have the thing where, first of all, everyone's involved. Like you're going to go, I'm taking the example of London. We used to have a weekly at Meltdown in London. You would go to Meltdown, enter Meltdown. Who's there? Problem X, winner of the biggest tournament in the world. Who is there? Hurricane, a man who won multiple European events. Like you have 4 to 5 international like caliber players who are here in the bar on Thursday evening to play Street Fighter together and like get better as a community. And you as a person, as a new player, you kind of want to get invested, like you enter and the first time you play Street Fighter is against the actual world champion. Nothing else has this. It's like, imagine you enter a tennis event and your first match is Rafael Nadal. And like, what the hell? You obviously get battered, but the experience is there. You met him.
Yeah, and it's kind of like that in sport as well. You have your local teams who will have, a world-class player or one of the best in the country. Everyone will know of a local player who's at a level above everyone. People would talk about, oh yeah, at my local football club, there's a guy who plays for Arsenal or whatever. And you'll hear stories about these people who have ascended the local scene and they're getting those opportunities and higher things. But there'll be one person amongst a group of 30 odd people. So I think that kind of system is there in sport, but then it didn't really come across in esports. And I feel like there's that, I don't want to say diva mentality in a lot of esports, but if you're past the playing with your local mates level, you just don't turn up to a local, right? Like if we did a Rocket League event in London, I can tell you now, all of the pro players who compete at the top level of Rocket League within an hour or two of London wouldn't turn up.
Yeah.
Because, I'm too busy playing.
But I think, the counter argument for this is it's doable because taking the Rocket League example, I don't know if you've seen, but that's what the French team does, Rocket Baguette. They currently have like a LAN in Paris, and the last LAN was won by Vatira, Exotic, and Zen, I believe.
That's true. I think the French community are better at it, I think. That's a fair thing to say. In esports, I think that's part of the reason why the French are so good at esports in general, is because they do take on a lot of those grassroots through to professional level blend where people turn up to everything. But
the thing with this is, for a game like Rocket League, it needs someone to foster that community thing, which Rocket Baguette does great. For fighting games, that spirit is fostered by default because, say, you live in London, you play Guilty Gear Strive, well, there's Meltdown in King's Cross, they run monthly on Guilty Gear Strive. You're going to go on the Saturday where they run it and naturally meet people who play Strive. And then join the Discord. We have a WhatsApp group for like the Strive UK. Make friends, and you're like, okay, cool. I just made friends. I'm just going to continue. My example is the best one because the story of me getting in proper competitive fighting games is that I've always played fighting games, but I used to play with my brother and my cousin. So we had the little family rivalry, Tekken 2, Street Fighter 2, like all of the old games and stuff. We grew up playing fighting games together, but I never went out of like my family to play fighting games. When I moved out from my hometown in 2011, moved from Nice to Paris, and I got to Paris and there was an arcade center called Arcade Streets. They had a tournament every Wednesday. I was like, I'm just gonna go and check. Went there the first day, was a lot of fun. I don't know anyone in Paris. I was just moving to Paris. And you get to this place and everyone welcomes you. It's like, oh cool, you play Street Fighter? Let's sit down, let's go have a drink after, let's go. So you immediately get into it, get to meet people. And okay, I'll be back next Wednesday. Same later, I moved to New York. What did I do when I moved to New York? I went to like the weekly place in New York called Next Level. Every Wednesday they have a tournament called NLBC. Big 2 back then when I moved there, and then it got renamed to NLBC, which is Next Level Battle Circuit. When I moved there, I still remember like the first day I went there. I came here, I played the tournaments, played against people. Random guy there came, was like, who are you? I've never seen you there. I'm like, oh yeah, I just moved from France. It's like, okay, cool. What are you doing Saturday? Let's go to New York. I'll show you the city.
That's amazing.
This guy became my best friend in New York,
Yeah.
So,
when I moved to London, I had a similar kind of thing with the Pokemon card stuff. Yeah. I literally Googled Pokemon cards near me, and then I went along to the local, And within a few weeks, people are really lovely and they're like, oh, I need help with cards. Let me know if you need any decks. Here's the WhatsApp, get you invited in the WhatsApp, So yeah, that kind of local community thing that where you get integrated in is so key to the experience.
Yeah.
And we've spoken a little bit about the sort of the fighting game communities on a local level. You mentioned how you first started out with family and then moved along to a local community. What was your experience like in terms of gameplay, like playing against those people when you first started? Did you naturally fit in like at a skill level,
no.
or were you well off?
So the story is like in our small family group of like we were like 5 guys playing the game. I think I was the best in these 5 guys, So I was like, yeah, I'm pretty good at Street Fighter,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go out one day, get absolutely destroyed. And I mean, I think it really triggers different responses in people. Like some people might get discouraged by it because it's true. There's one thing about fighting games, like there is quite a conflict even within the fighting game community about this, which is, are fighting games really welcoming? Because what happens when you go in fighting games is you sit down and you get battered. Like, you don't play Street Fighter. If you come and play against me, you're going to lose 2-0, you're going to get battered.
Mm-hmm.
But what's your mentality after? Are you going to be like, that game's too hard for me, I'm not playing? Or are you going to be, you can play like this, I'm going to train, I'll beat this guy eventually. That's kind of what happened in my brain, because I was like, wait, you can play like this? Let's just go. Like, let's play the game. Let's try and get better. And like, just get better slowly but surely. Because if there's one thing in the fighting game community that's cool, is that people who are playing the game on regular, obviously by playing you naturally improve. But whenever you have your core training group, this guy beats you, you improve and beat him, and then beat you, and you just like go higher and higher
and keep
until eventually you make the jump of going to a bigger tournament and play the better players, and maybe you realize that they're not that much better than you because thanks to your local community, you reach a decent level already.
Mm-hmm.
But the transition from like casual to actual competitive is pretty big because fighting games are known for this. It's kind of starting to sort itself out now, but historically, fighting games are games that teach you nothing. They're games that like, these are characters, this is a game, fight.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I'm jumping in a boxing ring, I didn't tell you what box is, you don't know what like a left hook, right hook is, fight. Have fun.
And the crazy thing about that is the level of depth there is in fighting games. And, I mentioned before, I was very fortunate to work with the Street Fighter team. So I learned a lot through them. They explained everything and how all the different buttons, like the light, medium, heavy, punch and kicks, the different small mechanics within the games. And obviously every game has a different set of specific mechanics, like reversals were a big thing in the recent Street Fighter. And like how all of these affect the in-game experience. Like the very fact that before and after doing something becomes a good option versus a bad option, even though it's the same button, just based off of the frame data. So you guys have studied the game to a level where you understand the frame data, the lag within each move and how much it takes you out the game. What's the right option every given moment. But even then, that doesn't take away from the fact that humans aren't perfect. No one's a robot. So therefore, you have to learn what is realistic for a human to do and so on and so on. How do players go about discovering these things to improve the understanding of the characters in the game?
So there are a lot of ways. So like fighting games, for people who don't watch fighting games, usually the best way I try to compare what fighting games are, because I think one of the hardships about fighting games is actually understand what's going on under like the layer of, two characters are fighting each other, because as you said, a lot's going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
The way we like to compare it is, it's kind of like if you and I were playing chess, but not in turn in real time. So, if you and I are playing chess, you know that if you move your pawn, it's only one, it's only one square. So it's faster than moving your horse than your 3 squares.
Mm-hmm.
So you're like, okay, if I move my horse now, maybe he has time to react to me moving the horse and doing something else.
Mm-hmm.
So you might just go for pawn, which is less reward, but faster. So at least you can advance your strategy. And both of us are literally playing chess, but not waiting for anyone to do anything. So you could be a person who is like, you know what, I'm just going to move all my stuff and not care about his stuff. Or be a person like, I'm going to wait for him to do something and react to what he does by just taking his pawn one by one. So that's kind of how it translates in fighting games. But then on the technical side, the usual thing you have is, obviously online communities are super dedicated in like understanding the game, figuring out the game. You have plenty of discords for like every game. You have character-specific discords, game-specific discords. But the main thing about fighting games that really, really makes it work for this is there is one very unique thing in fighting games, which is the characters in fighting games. They kind of create some kind of identity to the players. Like, you play Street Fighter, you like Zangiefs in Street Fighter 2, you are a Zangief player. Any Street Fighter that comes out, you play Zangief. You might play other characters, but your identity is, I am a Zangief player. Even if the character is terrible by meta, that's the example right now in Street Fighter 5, Zangief is in the bottom 5, has pretty much always been. Zangief players still play him. Mm-hmm. Why? Because like there's kind of an attachment to actual character, the personality. So these guys will like just be together as Zangief players and be like, oh, I found this new thing that only works on this exact character in this situation, but we're all gonna learn it and surprise this guy. So communities just work together, share the tech slowly but surely, and eventually you either have people who share tech to learn with each other, or you have very high level players who discover something, keep it silent until the next big event, maybe win that big event with that tech, and then it becomes popular and everyone like follows this.
Mm-hmm. With the discovering of things, something I've always wondered and looked at when people are doing these crazy combinations, I've just worked out this new optimal combo. Are those programmed into the game and designed to work together by the developers of the game? Or does the developer sort of create a bunch of moves and go, well, you can work out which ones work together, which ones string together?
So it's a bit of both. Like the hardship of a fighting game developer is to offer a system that's like open enough, flexible enough, but also regulated by some rules. Because if every move like links into every other move, the game never finishes. Mm-hmm. There are actually funny stories about this. There is a well-known game, an old game that is on Hokuto no Ken, which is like a manga from the 80s. This game is well known for one thing. The devs, I don't think they were aiming at a competitive game or anything, right? So they made a game where everything can go into everything. So this game is pretty much a game where if I hit you once and I pick and to do a combo correctly, you're dead, right? So obviously, competitively speaking, it's horrible, but it kind of became this fun game where people run tournaments, and the entire like gimmick of watching it is who's gonna hit the other first because you're dead, so you have that kind of tension. But that obviously, in terms of pure competitive design, is bad because obviously I put you once and like you're done next round. There we go. So there is quite a big challenge for the like developers to go for this. Every game, like pretty much every game, players eventually find things like an infinite combo and stuff, and then it gets patched out obviously these days. But the general challenge for fighting games, so the way they do this is they limit moves by speed. So the way it goes is like one move only gives you a specific window for the next move to combo into. So that way you know what combos and what does not. And the way they naturally like limit this to make sure it remains fair is that every fighting game has a mechanic that is called damage scaling and or hit stun decay, which is basically the longer your combo goes, the longer the damage of the new moves is scaled. So after a while, it pretty much does no damage. So it's better for you to stop the combo than to continue.
And reset it, yeah.
Exactly.
And that's where some people do quite clever traps where they give a small window for the opponent to escape.
Yeah.
And then they reset it and go back again, yeah.
Exactly.
Well, anyway, Street Fighter is an amazing game, but you've done all sorts of games, not just in the fighting game. You also work in Rocket League.
Yeah.
We met through Street Fighter, but I think shortly afterwards you started doing Gfinity Rocket League, where we started to get to know each other. Now, one of the cool things for me about you as a commentator is you don't just do broadcasts in one language. You're able to talk in multiple languages. I don't even want to assume how many languages, because it's probably way more than I realize. But from what I know, your main languages are English, French, and Arabic, right?
So I do mostly English and French. In terms of pure commentary, I just do English and French because I'm not fluent enough in other languages. Like I can speak Arabic, I can speak Spanish. I don't speak them at the level to do commentary. Even actually when I started doing commentary in English, it was quite a challenge, like doing it in not your prime language, right? But at the moment, I swap between French and English. Rocket League at the moment, I haven't done Rocket League in English for ages. Like obviously you and I did Gfinity together. Before Gfinity, I used to be with Rivals, which was called Pro Rocket League, then Pro Rivalry League, and then eventually Rivals Esports, right? These are the guys I started with. Scheist, that's how I met Scheist, was Rivals, we met through this, and then eventually, Scheist is now the GOAT.
Yeah, the main guy, big Psyonix guy now, yeah.
Exactly, but like, I started with this on Rocket League, and then eventually, I think, for me on Rocket League, I end up making good friends with all the French community as well. And I really like the French casting style of Rocket League as well. It's
amazing.
It's very different and unique, and it kind of fits me a bit more.
It's kind of closer to the fighting game style of the hyping up moments in the way they do.
Yeah.
To be honest, some events I do put the French casting on over the English casting because I love the way they hype up big games.
It's always extremely hype, exciting, and it keeps a touch. Like the thing I like about the French casting of Rocket League, and this is kind of like fighting games as well, is it keeps a touch of fun. It's not just purely game oriented. Like the casters don't hate it, like maybe joke around a bit at some point, like just have a moment. I still remember that day I was casting that one, and like it ended up being a great moment because I can't remember who they were playing, but there was a timeout, and during the timeout, Oski just stood up and started juggling with the ball and doing actual mad skills on the ball, you know? So we just turned out to like football mode. The entire chat went crazy. And like, to me, these are the moments that people remember as well. Like as a commentator, like I think these are the moments you try to create as well. And France is usually really good at this. For me on Rocket League, the story as well of French is, I think you know it as well as me, it's extremely hard in Rocket League to break out to the bigger events in English. And once I understood that I more or less had no chance to do RLCS, I was like, I'm gonna do it in French because I have a chance on this side of the language. But then language wise, like I do mainly English in fighting games, and I'm actually kind of in this position right now where I want to do more and more French because I like doing it like in French anyway, but it's also just adding a bit more, you know, to my position as like the French guy who's abroad and stuff. There are a few other French commentators. There's a guy called Arisu who does the game named Melty Blood. He started doing like big events in English and stuff. But having this like dual language profile is actually quite cool because not only am I kind of facilitating French viewers into like foreign streams and stuff, because I have a French accent, people in France tend to understand me better than they would understand you. So it also gives like that extra thing. And yeah, it just like creates a bit more of a community sense for them. You're like, oh, cool, that's a French guy. I'm gonna watch.
Yeah, because I used to work with a French team with Vitality, and all the French players would, you know, speak with you in French, and then I'd speak with you in English, and I just seeing the kind of crossover with the English and French community was always amazing. I think it's so key to have that diversity within the gaming space. As you mentioned, the French community in Rocket League has done so well because there's been enough of a French community that they've grown it and consequently have become one of the best gaming communities in the space.
I think for Rocket League, you know, and this is like one of the reasons it became like this is because the usual approach, like if you watch French esports, the usual approach is quite like patriotic. Oh, there's a French team. That's it. That's our team. Like I don't care about the guys, the level, anything. That's our team. No matter which one you watch, you're trying to watch, you know, Valorant, the K-Corp is there. That's my team. Done. I don't care about the game. That's just my team. And Rocket League kind of has the same approach, which is anytime a French player is there, by default, like, oh, cool, that's the French guy. But that's also French culture. If you watch football in France, if there's a top French player in Arsenal, in Manchester United, in Barcelona, naturally you'll have the commentator mention it a bit more like, oh yeah, that's a French player, you know? So that kind of creates from the viewers a whole sense of belonging. Be like, we are part of this group. We are cheering for the French guys. Our French team just won. Good. Like that adds this bit of that feeling of pride. And I think that's what like builds so much community sense because they all are like, we're part of that same bubble and we cheer for that bubble to be the best of them.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting, from the outside looking in, we see it as a sort of annoying factor about French people, how much they love the French. And I think it's one of those things that we all wish we had it. You know, we all wish we were a bit more like that. Yeah. But then from the outside looking in, it does look like all you care about is your French friends, your French speaking.
Yeah. It is challenging. Even for me as a caster for this, it is challenging because you kind of naturally get more excited about the people you know, the French. Like, I mean, my own example, I've known Astral for ages back from the Pro Rocket League days. So whenever Astral plays, I kind of have a bias. I love that guy, you know. But then you're trying to not be in a situation where it's only him, you know. You have to. It's okay to be biased towards someone that's not just don't make it an insult on the other ones. And I think that's what France does good is that even though they're usually biased towards the French, it's not a bias that is a negative thing for the opponents, because the praise for the opponents also like always given, and it just gives a healthy competitive environment.
Yeah. I think I've seen that quite a lot with the Rocket Baguettes. I mean, the Rocket Baguettes do broadcast around non-French teams all the time, right?
Yeah.
Like they even show some of the American tournaments, or that kind of thing. So amazing stuff from you with the French and English speaking. And I think I'd love to ask you more about Rocket League right now, but I think it's important that we focus on the fighting game community because I know a lot about Rocket League, but I want to know more about the fighting game community. One in particular that I want to ask about is those moments. I think fighting game communities tend to have these moments. I mean, one of the most famous moments in esports history, was it moment
37?
37. One of the most famous moments in esports history. And I think the word moment describes fighting games perfectly, because you do get these short periods, short bursts. It's such a fast game, but a short burst of something unbelievable, something incredible happens. And for you work in Dragon Ball quite a lot. Now, Dragon Ball as a game is this crazy, fast-paced, like there's so much going on, so much particle effects in the game. And sometimes you have these little moments which stand out. And there's one in particular for me, and that's the mirror fight at the start of a round. Talk to me about the kind of moments that happen in Dragon Ball.
So most iconic moments in Dragon Ball, I mean, there are quite a few, the ones I can think of. I think the most iconic still at the moment was in season 1. So season 1 of Dragon Ball was absolutely incredible for one reason. So, within fighting games, there are different genres. There are like the traditional 2D fighting games, aka Street Fighter. You have what you call the anime fighting games, which are Guilty Gear and everything, which are games that are like traditional Street Fighter style fighting games are a bit more methodical and slow paced. Anime fighting games are a bit more fast paced. Then you have 3D games, aka Tekken. Then you have Mortal Kombat, which is a bubble in its own. And usually Street Fighter players play Street Fighter, Tekken players play Tekken, and all that stuff. When Dragon Ball came out, the entire fighting game globe came into the game. So it kind of created this whole who's better, Street Fighter or like Guilty Gear or everything. And one of the big rivalries at the beginning, the biggest rivalry was Sonic Fox, who is one of the absolute best fighting game players of all time, multiple world championship belts in multiple games, against Goichi from Japan, who similarly got championships in Goichi is known as the anime game master, like no one beats him in this. But then there was a third guy, Leffen. Leffen comes from Super Smash Bros. And Leffen's story is iconic because in Smash Melee is a game obviously that's quite old, and it's a game that's quite stable in competition, right? There are 5 players who are called the 5 gods of Smash, and no one beats these 5. Like top 5 of every tournament was them. Leffen came out and beat all 5 and won major titles, and everyone obviously knows who Leffen is. Leffen went into Dragon Ball. Leffen has quite a polarizing personality as well. He likes to trash talk. He brings a lot of hype, with this. And that was this match, Leffen versus Goichi, where Leffen had he had won. Goichi was on his final character, no life, nothing. And for the next 2 minutes, Goichi simply decides, I shall simply not lose. There was an entire 2 minutes of both commentators being out of their breath, being like, when is he dying? He's got to die at some point. And Goichi bring out an incredible comeback on this. That was one of the competitive moments. But then the charm of Dragon Ball, I think, is that it has a lot of moments that are not just purely competitive, but that are outside. And for this, the outside of the game, the most iconic one is what we call the Cell Scream. So there's Cell in the game. Cell's intro is simply an intro of a camera on him, pans out, takes a stance, and just yells to power up. And the crowd decided that anytime Cell is in, the entire crowd will yell to power up along him. So it created moments at big tournaments like EVO, which is the biggest in the world, where if Cell is there, usually in fighting games, players just skip their entrance because that's wasted time, want to play, right? No one skips Cell. If you skip Cell, people don't like it.
That's interesting because that the classic beginning of any game, everyone skips the intro sequence, and that's one where
Cell, you have to leave Cell because the entire crowds will scream along him, and it creates that roar, the entire place is shaking. We had this last year at EVO, and that was the funniest because Cell was one of the strongest characters in season 1, so you see that a lot. Then he got nerfed and he became way less relevant, and not many people play him. But this year we had one Cell in EVO finals, and we were all looking forward to the scream. So the players are about to start the game. I was on commentary for this, ready, like, for the crowd to go crazy. And I know which one of the two players played and skipped the opening. The entire crowd is disappointed. The players restarted the match. They didn't go on. They restarted the match because they had to go through the screen.
That's incredible.
It creates so much culture because you have this thing where the player just likes to play into the crowd as well. And that's one of the best moments for this.
Oh, that's amazing. I will have to get that clip and put that in with it because moments like that are what makes gaming and esports so special is when everyone's behind something. And I think one of my favorite moments for me with Street Fighter is that sitting in the crowd when the local player is playing, especially when a lot of the Japanese players come over and you expect them to all be top 8. And then I think it was at VS Fighting, we had one of the Fnatic players, it was like 2018, can't remember their name, but it was so incredible watching them play and the whole crowd popping off every time they won a round. The kind of like, oi, oi, oi kind of sounds that you get alongside every connection that happens.
Yeah. So this is actually funny because this is originally a Japanese tradition.
Oh, okay.
So in Japan, I think that dates from Street Fighter 3. In Street Fighter 3, one of the main characters, Yun, he has like a special attack where he pretty much transforms into 3. And anytime he hits you 3 times, so he can do extended combos. And initially, it's kind of annoying because once he has his modes, well, the next time you get hit, he's going to juggle with you for ages. So the crowd kind of made it more bearable by any time this character will be there and do a combo, the crowd will actually sing along the juggles, being like, hey, hey, hey. And the French kind of took from this as well. So now in France, anytime there is a cool looking combo or long combo from the guy you like, they'll just like go and cheer. And as you said, it adds so much because you're just watching it, but having the entire crowd sing along a combo just makes it even better for you to get involved and you end up like just chanting with the crowds. Fighting games being this fast-paced thing as well means anything can happen anytime. So the crowd will explode at any moment just because that's the nature of the game as well. So it makes it so fun to just be part of it.
Yeah, because you never know what's going to happen next. So when it does happen, you get excited over it. I'm now going to take a little break from the story around fighting games. We'll probably end up talking about more fighting games because I want to know what your top 5 games of all time are. Now, it can be 5 games that are relevant to your journey in esports and the things that have given you opportunities to travel around the world, whatever it is. Or it can be games that you just really enjoy playing. So whenever you're ready, take it away with your top 5 games.
5 is it's always difficult to have top 5 because I've been playing games since, like, I'm 33 now. I've been playing games since as long as I can remember, obviously. So that's a lot of games to consider. For me, I still think to this day, my all-time favorite game is Zelda Ocarina of Time. That game was...
What a game. Do you know what? I don't think anyone's actually said it before in here, and it surprised me.
Because getting young people, yeah?
No, we've had some Sega Mega Drive players and all that sort of stuff. But no, like Ocarina of Time is one of the greatest games of all time. I think a lot of it comes down to people I have on here tend to be esportsy people. So they talk about online games where you can play against people. But actually, Ocarina of Time just fundamentally was an unbelievable game. Yeah. How much content there was in it, the story, how much you invested in the character.
Yeah, it's really this, and like the way it completely, changed the way we see video games because we are going from the 2D to 3D thing. And back then, aside from Mario 64, most 3D games were a bit like still shaky. They were still looking for how to do a good 3D game. And then Ocarina of Time came out. And yeah, as a kid, like that was the game, Ocarina of Time. And then later Majora's Mask. That was literally so many years of my childhood. Like I always keep it because obviously it's a quality game, but also the whole memories of like, that's my game, is this. That's the one. Second is Street Fighter 4, because like aside from being my favorite fighting game of all time, Street Fighter 4 had such an influence on me as a person. I wouldn't be where I am without Street Fighter 4. Street Fighter 4 is the game that got me into competitive, that made me meet my best friends, made me start traveling. And literally today I'm a full-time esports person. Without Street Fighter 4, I wouldn't have like started making this change. Like Game of VC is excellent. It's, to me, I mean, we all have different favorite entries in the series because they're all very different. To me, 4 is my favorite at the moment. Waiting for 6 to see if it can like change the tides a bit. But that game was like exceptional, created so much, has so much impact. I'll have to like put it in top 5.
Yeah, because this was going to be my interesting angle for the fighting game people on here would be there's so many different titles that you would have to choose one of them. Because typically we have people say Call of Duty and then you're like, okay, which one? Or Pokemon, which one? But with the fighting games, you've got the way that each of them feels mechanically is so important.
Yeah.
Typically people would choose a game because they like the maps or the characters or whatever, which obviously is still a factor in fighting games. But a lot of it is just about the pacing, the way the mechanics work in it. And I think with Street Fighter 6 coming out, is there any inkling to you as to whether that's going to be your kind of game, seeing so far what they've shown?
It looks like it is, because so there's something with Street Fighter which is quite interesting, which is unlike a lot of other games, Street Fighter's specialty is that anytime they go for a new iteration, it's completely different from the previous one. You know, like Call of Duty, if you've played one Call of Duty, the next one is similar with new stuff. If you play any kind of game, even on fighting games, if you play Tekken 3, you can play Tekken 4, you can play Tekken 5. Street Fighter is basically like, all right, the era of playing this way is finished with Street Fighter 3. Now we go with 4 that introduces a completely different way to play. Now we go with 5, which introduces a completely different way. So the way it usually goes is that with every new Street Fighter, we lose some players and we gain some players. Because when 5 came out, a lot of Street Fighter 4 players were like, it's not really what I liked in 4, so I'm not really into the game anymore. But a lot of older players are like, oh, I like that part of Street Fighter before, and it comes back with 5, so I'm going to get back into the game. So they're also different. What 6 is trying to do is to gather a bit of every Street Fighter in and make it like literally all-star Street Fighter mechanic kind of like approach. And it's definitely very, very, very efficient so far. Like, I think it's going to end up in my favorites. I don't know yet if it's going to dethrone, obviously, the number 1.
So we had Street Fighter 4 there and Ocarina of Time. What do we think for number 3?
My number 3 is like, I think I'm the only person in the world saying this game, but I have a very unique relationship to this game. It was on Xbox 360, Project Gotham Racing 4. I've always played racing games, mainly coerced by my big brother, who is a huge car guy. And, you know, back when I was a kid, he would always buy Gran Turismo and stuff and would always like play. But PGR4 was like kinda my entry to online games, because that was when I got the Xbox 360, Xbox Live and all that stuff. And I love the game, but also, you know, it was this golden era of online where you could go in any lobby, say hello, and people would answer hello back. You know what I mean? Today you go to a lobby and say hello, and it's like, fuck you, you know, I don't want to talk to you. Like, back then, you would go to a lobby, say hello, and make friends. You know, people would go, hello, how are you? Yeah, let's play. Oh, where are you from? Oh, you're from France. That's cool. Let's drive and stuff. So we spent, like, myself, my brother, we spent so long, like so many nights just like racing in this game, having fun, meeting people, meeting friends and stuff. Like it keeps a special place, you know, like from all of this. And as a racing game, it's an excellent, like half arcade, half simulation kind of game. So it's like, it will remain one of my favorites, even though it's not everyone's favorite, but, you know, have to be original a bit.
Yeah, I think you're going to be one of the few people who ever says that. Maybe in, I don't know how many episodes of this we'll ever do, but maybe in like 100 episodes time, we'll have someone who'll be like, yeah, this game, you've never
have
heard
someone
of
else saying it, just like put me in touch. Yeah, we'll be friends by default.
You can say hello to them and they'll say hello back.
we might know each other, you know, the community was not that big, so we might have played and everything.
So number 4 then.
Yeah, number 4, I'll go for like one of my favorite genres, RPGs. I play every RPG ever, and my favorite RPG is Chrono Trigger from Super NES, which is, I think to this day, is still seen as one of the absolute best RPGs of all time. And for me, Chrono Trigger was kinda, so that was back when I'd see era of like, you know, emulators came out and we all were looking for like more games and stuff. So I was like, okay, let me go on the Super NES emulator and see every game and stuff. And that's kind of when I fell in love with RPGs, because obviously the Super NES had every Final Fantasy, Secret of Mana, all this stuff. And Chrono Trigger was the one that really hit me like, okay, that's amazing. Like the game is great, the system's great, the story is great, the characters are great. Without Chrono Trigger, I don't think I would have played that many RPGs after. So because it made me an RPG fan, like that's what I try to do. Like when I make a top of my games, I try to, because obviously there are a lot of games I love, but there are games that shaped who I am as a player later. So that's why they're naturally in top 5. You know, like Zelda shaped me as like what I like in games and everything. So that's the 4. And for the 5th, so that would be a pretty close, because it's quite difficult to, you know, obviously narrow it down to 5. Because on one side there's Dragon Ball FighterZ, which like I have to put, right? But at the same time, I kind of want to talk about single player games and everything, because I've been a gamer forever, right? I've played every single player game and everything, but just off the system of it by default, I have to go for Dragon Ball Fighters, because outside of the fact that Dragon Ball Fighters also is my main game, is the game I'm heavily invested in both organizing, commentating and stuff. When Dragon Ball Fighters came, for me, that game was literally my dream game, because I grew up with Dragon Ball. Dragon Ball is like probably my favorite like series of all time, because that was literally my entire childhood. And my entire life, I would play Dragon Ball games, and I would think, man, when is an actual fighting game coming out for Dragon Ball? And when they announced Dragon Ball Fighters, and we saw that it's Arc Systems Work, which is one of the best fighting game developers, they're the guys who do Guilty Gear and everything, doing a Dragon Ball game. When I saw the announcements, I literally said, that's it, that's done, that's my life. That game comes out, and I was like, I don't even care if I don't like the fighting style that much. The fact that there is an actual fighting game of Dragon Ball. Ever since I was a kid, and I was playing the old Dragon Ball Super Butoden on Super NES, or the Budokai on PlayStation, I was like, these games are good, but I need them to be fighting games good, because usually they're here to reproduce what you see in the series rather than provide competition. Fighters is here to reproduce them while providing competition. So the impact of it is obviously super unique.
Yeah, well, it was one of the games that I enjoyed watching the most when I went along to fighting game events, because it was aesthetically quite a nice looking game to watch. I found Street Fighter and Dragon Ball to be the easiest to understand when watching, just because they're not. It's not necessarily the way they're animated or anything. It's just, it's very clear when someone is doing something cool.
Yeah.
And then when it finishes, it's very clear that it's finished. And then you can see the sort of like the neutral stuff very, very nicely. Some of the 3D games, it's quite hard to see the spacing. Like I find it quite hard with Tekken to really understand when someone makes a mistake or is positioned badly or a really clever combo is done.
Yeah, it is a strength. It's a strength of fighting game anyway, because for me as a person, right, I don't play MOBAs or anything. So like I've never played League or Dota. The main reason why I did not is because I know that if I play and like it, I'll sink so much time into it. So I decided to stay away. But as a result, like I'm curious, right? I watch League and I see people being excited and I'm like, why?
I don't understand
like,
why.
All I see is like, I don't know, things just moving on the screen. I don't understand what's exciting about what just happened. While usually on Dragon Ball, there's something cool happened. The camera shifts to show you like the hit. They're like, okay, something definitely cool happened. And that's what the game brings, you know, like that's make it easy for you to watch. And just quickly for the honorable mention, because I was saying,
I was going to say, you probably want to have a few honorable mentions in there.
I would get in for ages. We'd be there until tonight, you know, so if you'll give me that time. But I'll just give one honorable mention, Mass Effect 2. Mass Effect 2 is like... Mass Effect 2 is my favorite, like, single-player game / even story. Like, I don't think I've even watched a movie or series, like a space-related kind of story that's better to me than Mass Effect 2. Like that game was insanely good, played so many times. Good. Then 3 did what it did, but you know, 2 was like 2 to me was peak, you know, like that's the one.
So you're a bit of a sucker for a story and like something that you can get really immersed in.
I have these things. So I'm quite annoying in games for this because I want a great story, but if the gameplay is not good enough, I just won't play. Like I have this thing, I just can't get through. It's just how I am. But there are plenty of games that have great stories, but I played the game and the gameplay just didn't keep me in. Like I think Skyrim is the best example. I've never gone through Skyrim because I will play an hour and be like I don't like the gameplay. Like even though the world, the story, everything draws me into the game, but I can't get through that hurdle of not liking the gameplay. So it needs to be a fine balance that I think Mass Effect achieves. The Witcher 3 achieves this as well. Like I played Witcher 2, I stopped halfway through because the gameplay was I hated the gameplay so much. I just played it for the story. 3 kind of fixes this and gives you decent enough gameplay to go to the end. So that balance needs to be hit. And
I mean, it's so key because if you're immersed in a story and then the mechanics sort of break you out of that immersion, and you get frustrated with something, or you want it to feel like it's intuitive, challenging, and all those kind of things. I think that's something that's being lost a little bit now with a lot of modern story games. Is they're a little bit too focused on the visuals and the way it looks and not about the way it feels to play.
I agree.
Because that's how they sell, right? Like they sell with a trailer, and they don't really care as much for the experience as they used to in games.
Assassin's Creed is the best example. I used to be a huge fan of Assassin's Creed. New Assassin's Creed, I play them for an hour and I'm like, okay, like I think like I've got past it, you know. It's like eventually you just move to other stuff. So it's hard to find that right balance. Every once in a while you find something. Elden Ring is the most recent today to me. You find the one that just hits everything and you just sink hours into it. So now I'm looking for the next one. Probably Zelda. Zelda comes out this week.
It's like 2 days from now.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
The end of my life.
There you go. That's going to be the next journey for you.
Yes. I can't obviously I told you about the Ocarina of Time. Zelda is my favorite gaming series. So I know that as soon as the game comes out, I won't see many people for a few days.
Yeah, I didn't get Breath of the Wild because at the time when it came out, I was in quite a busy period of my life. And I was like, I can't get this game because it will destroy my productivity. And those kind of games are very immersive.
Yeah.
And like you said, you won't see a few people for a bit.
Yeah.
I had a friend from the Knox crew, actually, Andre, who used to book time off work around a game release. And he would prep his like compulsive gaming phase and be like, right, for these next 3 days I will game this game to the point where I've done with it, and then I can go back to work. And
to be honest, I'm like this, you know. I'm like, for games at least, I'm that person who like I always play games, but every once in a while there is that game that comes and hits, and it's literally all my brain can think about for the next few weeks. I think Elden Ring was the one. Like when Elden Ring came out, my entire life was like I would be at work plus working from home. You know, I'd be working all day. Anytime I have some time, I'd just go to Google to look for Elden Ring stuff. And my entire brain was like, I can't wait for the end of work so I can just jump and play Elden Ring until the end of the night. And then I finish the game and life feels empty and you wait for the next one to hit. So maybe Zelda, I don't know, waiting for the next one.
Yeah, well, hopefully Zelda is that game for you. And then the other question that we ask all our guests, we ask them about the top 5 games. We also ask them their greatest ever gaming achievement. Now, for some people, this is related to work. You know, maybe it'll be working in a final of a game of something, or might be something you've done in game, like 100%ing a game or a particular competition win or something like that. So what's your greatest ever gaming achievement?
I have 2 tied because I don't have just one, but the first one was back when on Street Fighter 4 I used to compete, and on Street, obviously I was really trying to get to the competitive mindset, learning the game. Like I was training pretty much every day, trying to get better and better. And I had that one on in Stunfest, which used to be the biggest French event back then. There was a team tournament, a 2v2, and I teamed up. Like I kind of teamed up by chance with one of the best players in the world. So I was like, oh cool, I'm actually gonna do well. But the actual story is everyone thinks he carried me to victory. I didn't lose a single game until finals. Like that day was so good because I think I was just powered up by the fact that he was next to me. Like I don't care. I played against Japanese players, they lost. I played against all of them, they lost. Until finals, I lose the game. And the finals was so unique because it was my first time on a very big stage. And I still remember just like walking out, and I was the last French, you know, in the competition. So everyone was cheering for me, terrified. The beginning of the game was terrifying, but like that memory will stick forever because playing with the entire crowd behind cheering for you, once you've done it once, that's it, you're hooked. You're like, I need that dopamine rush again. I'll play again. I'll eventually get back. And even after this, I put more effort. I went back onto stages. I got into situations where people were cheering for me. I'm like, damn, like that's the best.
That's the best feeling. Did you win the final?
It's like, yes.
I was thinking, but the fact you didn't mention it, I was thinking maybe you didn't.
No. We won the final. You know, I won my match, he won his match, and good. So like I did my part of the job at least. I'm glad that like that was the main thing I was worried about. I was like, I don't want to go to final and lose all my matches and let him carry me and then kind of be seen as a fraudulent, you know, victory. But I did my job. And I'll remember that for a long time because it's like, I mean, all of my competitive successes I will remember because it's like the whole mindset of like consistently working on something and then eventually it pays off. Like it feels so good, like, because the day you beat like that big player who used to beat you all the time and you went home and you trained for like weeks, months, and then you came back, you played him in a tournament and you win, that feeling you have is like, that was worth it. You know, it's all of this.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah. And I say tied because the other one is what was from last year. I got to do commentary for EVO finals. EVO is the biggest fighting game tournament in the world. When I started watching fighting games, EVO was the first big tournament I watched. That was EVO 2011. And EVO every year delivers so much. And as a person involved in fighting games, EVO is your goal. Like, you want to be part of EVO. If you're a player, you want to win EVO. If you're a tournament organizer, you want to be part of EVO organization. If you're a streamer, you would like to help the stream at EVO. And if you're a commentator, you want to be there. And last year I got like the honor of being on the finals of Dragon Ball. And to make it even better, a Frenchman won, and he's from the same hometown as me.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Like, that was literally the perfect scenario. Like, these top 8 was about 3 hours long, and these 3 hours felt like being on a cloud for 3 hours on, like, man, I love what I'm doing right now. It was, like, so good, but that remains, like, top memory.
Oh, special memories there. Yeah. I mean, the EVO experience, I can only imagine how that must have felt, because I've seen EVO as a fairly casual fighting game fan, and even to me, the idea of going to an EVO would be amazing. So to be able to commentate that final and it's such a big crowd as well, isn't it? Especially now we've got less COVID restrictions. Getting back to a big crowd must have felt even more special.
It felt
post-COVID.
even more special because it was the first EVO post-pandemic as well. So everyone was like waiting for that moment where the entire crowd comes back together in Las Vegas to play and to watch. So it was like extra exciting from everyone.
So talk to me a bit about how COVID affected the fighting game community, because you mentioned before how it's so important that you have offline play, everyone gets together in person, but to have a period of a few years where you couldn't do all that, how did that affect the fighting game community?
A lot. It did affect a lot because, so we mentioned fighting game are mainly offline, but there's another reason why they're mainly offline is because the online systems in fighting games is generally not good. Like, there is this thing where Japanese developers are a bit behind of the curve on this, and they're still using dated technology for online systems. So you play online and it often has lag and everything. And in a game like a fighting game where everything is so like millisecond related, a slight bit of lag can completely destroy it. So for years, players have always seen online as just training grounds, right? No top player saw online as a serious competition place because it had factors outside of your control. You could have like a random lag stuff that would make you drop something and lose. You could somehow be in the UK and play against a Spanish guy and it's just unplayable. So what do you do in tournament if it's unplayable? It's not my fault. It's not his fault. We have to play through it. Maybe I'll win, but I'm not better than you, or vice versa. It's kind of part of the things to accept. The thing is, when COVID arrived, we were like, we have to accept this or to not play fighting games. What do we do? So, I mean, the community as a whole kind of accepted this and went on, I guess we'll like compete online until offline comes back. The good thing during pandemic is Guilty Gear Strive came out, and Strive has an excellent online system. So Strive actually got a huge influx of players, me included. I've never been a Guilty Gear player until Strive, and Strive caught me, but also Strive online is great. So you can go and have fun with it. But that entire transition was really difficult because a lot of the world-class players, they wouldn't be that good online. And like I talk to them, I have a lot of friends like in this community, right? And it's also, it hurts you, right, as a person, because you know that if you were sitting next to this player, you would win. But right now you're online and you lose. Because a lot of players who exclusively play online, they tend to design a gameplay that works online, because online has a bit of delay. Moves that you can react to offline are harder to react to online. So you will use them online and I'll get hit by them more. While if you use them against me offline, I'll block, I'll punish, I'll win against this. So it kind of creates a lot of competitive frustration. But having only this, what ended up happening is lots of players like ended up being like, you know what, I'm going to use online to get better. I think some of the best examples I have are Mr. Crimson for Street Fighter. Mr. Crimson is a French player. He's always been like good as in top 8 level, but not good as in winning tournament level. And he was like, you know what? We're all home. I'm going to just train the hell out online. And once the offline came back, Mr. Crimson came out. And right now he's considered probably top 5, top 10 in the world. There are like a lot of stories of just players who got better because they decided to take online seriously. And on the side as well, a lot of content creators, myself included, got that boost because online tournaments were the only thing on offer. So people would just go and watch, and people were home all the time watching stuff. So you had more opportunities to do content. So the transition was tricky, and it was extra tricky because no matter what you do, there is still this image of it's online. Like, okay, he won, cool, but it's online. And it creates, obviously dramas because like, oh, this guy wins, but he's actually not good. Like people like to talk about this. It was like definitely tricky. Then offline came back. And what offline kind of proved is that generally speaking, if you're good online, you're at least decent offline.
Yeah.
And the greatest story of the online to offline that happened is this kid named Ending Walker. English player, he's 16. He's 16, started playing Street Fighter 5 during pandemic.
Oh, really?
Right? First off, considering how bad Street Fighter 5 online is, I don't know why you would start. Like, I would have played Rocket League or a game that works online, But he decided he would like heavily play Street Fighter. And slowly but surely during pandemic on online tournaments, Ending Walker started to show up in top 8, then top 4, then top 3, then finals. And then he got a run where online no one would beat Ending Walker. Every event, no matter who entered, Problem X, world champion would enter, he loses. Hurricane, top 3 in the UK would enter, he loses. And everyone was like, okay, is this kid the real deal? Or is it just online? Because obviously no one really knew. Then offline came back. Ending Walker went to versus fighting in Birmingham, got second. He then went to UFA in Paris and won UFA against like literally some of the absolute best in the world were there. He won against them, got qualified to world finals and got 5th at world finals. So he just showed that no matter how bad we perceive online, because it's true that it's a different game, if you take it with the right mentality, you'll actually get better at the game and help translate into your offline skills.
Okay, so there's another side of this here that I'm interested in, because you mentioned he was quite young. Now, the fighting game community in general is quite a lot older, because it's quite a niche community. People have been around in it for a while. Like, I was watching Daigo the other day, and he's in his 40s.
Yeah,
right?
Daigo is 37, I believe.
Daigo?
Yeah, I think he's 37, 38.
We can.
Yeah.
I think he's
41. He's
41.
40 yet.
Wait, maybe it was someone else, but yeah, there's.
Sako is 40. Gamer is 40. There are a few top 40 players,
He's 41.
He's 41. You know what? It's pandemic, man. Time stopped.
He was born 19th of May, 1981.
Damn.
So Japanese player who was part of Moment 37, right?
Yep.
From Street Fighter 2.
3.
Was that 3? Yeah, so that's a long time ago in terms of the fighting game community. It's been around a while, and a lot of these players are still there from the original days. But the question comes with esports is how are these people so able to compete at the top when esports traditionally in other games is a young person's game, and especially something like Rocket League, which we both know is full of teenagers and early 20s, and if you hit 22 you're getting a bit old.
I always laugh at this when I read stuff on Rocket League like he's 24, he's old, and I'm like,
he's not old yet. and I guess so there's two angles to this. One, do you think in games like Rocket League, older people could still compete at the top if they took on more of the fighting game mentality, which is the passion, love for the game, where you grind it every single day and keep working on it, keep trying to keep up with the current trends? Or do you think there's just not enough of these young players coming through, like the one you just mentioned, who's 16 coming through and then taking all the tournaments because they're young, developed it quickly and so on? Which side do you think is true, the fighting game?
I think there's a bit of truth in both sides, as in. So I think first off, I think the best and thing to say is about that whole thing about, in traditional esports, people like saying, oh, when you get older, your reactions get worse. Yeah, that's when you get to 50, not when you get to 25. At 25, you have great reactions at 25, at 30 and everything. This is kind of a myth from esports. I'm not sure where this myth comes from, but when I see people like, oh, he's 25, his reactions are not as good, that's like, scientifically speaking, this is actually not true. But so I think there is a bit of culture that puts you down when you're, oh, I'm 25, maybe it's a bit difficult. I think on a game like Rocket League, for example, the difficulty is the game is really constantly evolving, like the mechanics constantly evolve. So you as a player, you have to kind of reinvent yourself constantly, and it's difficult, right? So I understand why there is this thing on Rocket League, which is, or on other games, which is, I'm tired of reinventing myself. Like the best recent thing, right, was the whole fairy pick and K-Dop not using air roll buttons. They were still using like normal air roll until like last year, which is insane. Like, why would you do this? But both of them said it's too hard to relearn the entire game, the entire movement with this. I would rather keep like this. But obviously you're kind of limiting yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because in Rocket League, for the longest time, when K-Dop and Fairy Peak were doing well, they had to spin, when they were flying through the air, they would spin with their nose facing towards the ball because that was the most optimal way to fly in the game.
Yeah.
Now, the most optimal way to fly in the game is fly to the point where your bottom of your car lands on the ball.
Yeah.
And there's a whole different movement pattern. And then there's even things like musty flicks where you got to fly in a way where you turn your nose away from the ball and then flick it towards it. So all of these different movement patterns are very unfamiliar to the players who are used to being, I just need to fly with my nose directly at it at all times.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, reinventing those kind of things, reinventing those muscle memories and movement patterns is very tricky.
Yeah. I think that's why so many of the top Rocket League players are that young, because like they're still quote unquote recent enough at the highest level that that's how they learn the game. But that's kind of how the eras go. Fighting games have this thing where no matter how old you are, the core fundamentals of fighting games are similar. So if you've worked on them since Street Fighter 2 in the 90s and you've been top level at them, you still remain top level. I think the best example of this right now I can give, obviously you have Daigo and everything. You have a lot of 40 plus players. There's a UK player called Ryan Hart. Same thing, he's 42 now, Ryan. If you hear me, Ryan, I hope I'm not lying. He's about 42. Ryan was like the best in Europe for a long time. Has always been good in games. He's like from one of the rare people to be successful in both 3D and 2D games, because he won both on Tekken and Street Fighter. Today, Ryan he works at ESL. He's in Germany now. He's a dad. He's married. He plays, right, but he doesn't play as I'm gonna win a tournament. He went to EVO, and at EVO he beat Idom. Idom is the number 1 American player, and he actually finished second at EVO. But Ryan Hart, with his 30 years of experience in fighting games, was just, I'm just going to play smarter than you for a moment. And that's kind of the thing with fighting games, which is there's a lot of legacy where you're so used to these micro interactions that your brain is set to react to it perfectly. That's kind of why I'm always into that whole reaction thing. You watch Daigo, he's 41. He will react to things at the microseconds, right? And he's not the only one. GamerB is 43. Sako is 43 as well. Like quite a few 40 years old.
It's anticipation, isn't it? It's that.
It's experience,
It's experience, and you can react to things faster if you're ready for them. It's the classic thing of like in science they test reaction speed, where they tell you something's about to happen versus not telling you something's about to happen. And you're much more likely to react when you know it's about to happen. And
that's the thing in fighting games, right? It's like the way you play fighting games is you have that thing that we call the mental stack, which is you can't focus on the 10 options your opponent has at all times. But what you do is like, oh, I am at this range and he's there. So from this range, he can only throw a fireball or jump or dash. So I'm just going to wait for these 3 and kind of focus on the jump. So if he jumps, I punish it. But then at this moment, the guy decides to do something a bit less expected and you can't react because you were focused on the rest. So a lot of it in fighting games boils down to this. As a result, you have that kind of natural advantage of being older and having more experience. But then I think the other reason for having a bit less like young players in fighting games now is because fighting games are a harsh like place, right? It's like, first of all, when you lose, you can only blame yourself. And believe me, being in fighting games, most people never blame themselves. They'll blame you. They'll say your character is stupid. They'll say it was laggy. They'll never say I lost because I did something wrong, When you play a team game, you lost, my teammate was bad. But how many times have you solo queued on Rocket League? Yeah, it's my teammate, it's not me, it's normal. So I think not offering you this coping mechanism is already like hard on you. But then the second thing is, because the whole legacy system exists on Street Fighter, it's very easy to be discouraged, being like, ooh, I'm about to play Luffy. This guy has been top on Street Fighter since 2010. I have 10 hours on the game. Why would I bother? I'll never get to his level. So I think there is a bit of this on one side, but the proof is, with Ending Walker and a couple of other players coming out, it's not really about your age or anything. It's really about how you play the game. I'm a very strong defendant on age doesn't matter that much. Because if you're young, you're actually going to bring a kind of fresh mindset into the game that someone like Daigo, who has 30 years of experience, maybe won't consider, because oh no, that's not how you play fighting games. But then you end up teaching Daigo something. And that's the kind of stuff you bring. So to me, it's just, that's the beauty of fighting games. It's you have literally everything. You will have grand finals, which is a 16-year-old kid against a 41-year-old guy, and who else does this?
Yeah, I think it's also like the malleable brain of a young person comes in, and they can learn things a lot quicker. And then if they get there quicker, they can then potentially bring in new stuff. I mean, we're seeing it with Zen right now in Rocket League. He's doing stuff that no one else is thinking of doing.
Yeah.
And so that's that creativity and I guess extra level of control in a short space of time is likely to keep progressing. Whereas if you, like you said, if you're set in your ways over a long period of time, it's much harder to add that little 1%. Whereas if you've added 90% of your skill in the last year, you're much more likely to add 1 more percent a lot easier. So
yeah, legacy is like both a gift and a curse for this, because it happened a lot. It happened in Street Fighter 5. In 5, it was Punk from America he was like 18, I think, back then, like 17, 18, and Punk played a way that a lot of legacy players deemed impossible, because from the whole heap of fighting game experience, they were like, oh, this specific approach is not efficient in fighting games. Punk was like, I don't have that heap of like proof and experience. I'm just going to make it work. And he did. So that's kind of what helps breaking. And the Zen example for Rocket League is great as well, right? Zen brings approaches that no one else thought of. That whole error thing from Zen still blows my mind as a person who's still trying to get used to error rights. I'm terrible at this. But it's this, like, they bring a lot. I think that's what I love about fighting games, that they kind of remove that whole age thing, because I think it's unfortunate, like that you see on Rocket League or the esports, you have players who get to 24 and they're kind of forced to think that they're too old, and they're not. I mean, Counter-Strike has a couple of 30 plus years old as well, and Counter-Strike is a very high reaction kind of game, so it just proves that, why would we say that you can't play anymore if like tennis players are still there at like 35, football players are there at 34, 35. Surely we can react at 35, man. It's not
I think the reaction speed thing is always a terrible argument, because so much of games is about experience and anticipation and tactics and that kind of thing. Yeah. I guess that's where Rocket League does kind of fall short with the tactical side that, first person shooters can have or fighting games can have. But still, any old people out there listening who want to compete, just do it. The other thing as well is you don't have to win. You don't have to be the best in the world, as we mentioned before. Just turn up to a local tournament and enjoy competing. For this in fighting games, we joke a lot because obviously there is a lot of age spread. There is this constant joke being young man reactions and old man reactions. It's like when a 30 plus person reacts to something crazy, he looks at you and it's like, young man reactions. I still got them. It's part of the entire culture. Yeah, well, we do love the age range. I think that's a fun image for anyone who's not seen it before of someone who could be a dad of another person. I have this, man, as someone who's involved in Rocket League as well. Every time I go attend a Rocket League event, I'm like, damn, I'm old. Like most of the people attending are 15 to 18. I'm like, I don't dislike you guys, but like we're not gonna be friends, we have different lives right now. A whole different generation. But when you go to Street Fighter, you have pretty much every age range represented, so you get a bit more like, to talk to everyone. So talk to me a bit about a fighting game event. So this is something that's interesting with other games, like we mentioned Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike and Valorant won't appear at the same event. They'll be separate events in their own right. Same thing with Dota, League of Legends. Any kind of game that's similar in title, they'll be spread out at different events. Fighting games kind of have these big all-inclusive events where multiple fighting games are all appearing at the same time. I mean, I went to a few where it would be Dragon Ball, Smash, Street Fighter, Tekken, all in the same building. Why do you think fighting game has turned into this communal thing where all the FGC comes together in one place? So I think the very practical first reason, to not sugarcoat it, is there aren't many fighting games that are big enough to run a massive event on its own. So by default, when you were doing an event, because it was community, you just have the Tekken guy comes and takes care of the Tekken side, the Street Fighter guy comes and takes care of the Street Fighter side. But also the other thing is there's a huge crossover in fighting games. Like, taking my example, I currently play Street Fighter, Dragon Ball, and Guilty Gear. So if I go to an event, I'll like play all three and I'll watch all three. And then, I'll watch some, I don't know, Tekken, because I like watching other fighting games. So like there is a lot of crossover from fighting game to another. Most fighting game players play at least 2 fighting games. Like most of them are like, you're on Street Fighter, eventually you reach that point where you're like, I love Street Fighter, but I kind of want to look at something new. So I don't know, you go on Dragon Ball and you're like, oh, that game's cool.
or maybe you don't like Dragon Ball and you try Tekken. So you kind of have this crossover. But then it's also the whole community side, obviously, which is originally the way this worked is that it was people from the different communities being like, okay, let's find a venue together and just run something on our games and just make an event happen. So that legacy of it is pretty huge. And as a result, today, you go to any event, any major event. And I'm saying major, like not even major. I'll give an example of right now, right? This weekend, there is this event in the UK called Wake Up on Trent. So in Trent. And it's like, there are maybe 100 people coming. So it's like, decent, it's regional, kind of event. They have 6 games. You can play Guilty Gear, Dragon Ball, Street Fighter, just because it's an event for anyone who likes fighting games. That just makes it cool for you as well as a player attending, that you can actually get to watch other stuff. You don't only focus on your one game. It creates a bit more of like a community feeling as well, which is, even though we play different games, we end up here doing the same thing. And it's always fun. Like I made friends on other games just because I would sit down and watch Tekken, and I don't play Tekken. Right? I enjoy watching Tekken. I don't play Tekken at all. But I made a lot of friends on Tekken community just from this, and now they watch me play Dragon Ball 2, and you have that whole exchange. But it's also the fact that there is a crossover, because you were mentioning Counter-Strike and Valorant. Objectively, most people who play Valorant have played Counter-Strike before and potentially still play. That like there is a crossover in players. So if you go to a big LAN, you go to DreamHack, there is both Counter-Strike and Valorant, you're probably gonna watch both. It's pretty similar to this. It's just that these games are so big on their own that if you want to make a big event, you'll focus it on one game and keep it on one.
Makes sense. And I guess the FGC can often get a bit of negative press. People will look at them and be like, oh, they're their own little clique in gaming. People will go through all the games and be, oh, there's this, there's this, there's this. Oh, there's also the FGC. And it's almost like you're this weird offset group that people who don't understand it don't know about it. Have you felt that experience at times, maybe talking with brands, talking with esports orgs or anything like that? Do you feel like the FGC gets a bit of a weird reputation?
So it's a bit weird to me, right? Because there's the thing, and it's actually like in parts, obviously not a major thing, but that there is a part of the FGC who's like, oh, esports suck. We don't want to be esports. But that's true, because there are a lot of people in the FGC who see esports as this big thing where money is invested, but identity is removed from it, right? I think one of the strong things of FGC is today all of the major events, they come from a group of dedicated people who gave their time for fighting games and eventually made it big. While most esports come from, the Valorant is Riot who invested and put people on, so it might be seen as a bit more impersonal. So that's like the thing. But then on the esports side, you have that whole thing of like the difficulty of engaging the FGC is fragmented because they have many games, right? It's like one of the difficulty. If you engage Counter-Strike, it's Counter-Strike. If you engage the FGC, you have to engage with Street Fighter, Tekken, like Smash, Guilty Gear, and it's different communities of different people with different views and everything. So it's seen as this. The main reason why it's difficult to get sponsors is just because in terms of views, the FG fighting games are not as big as others. So like that's still the thing fighting games are working on, which in my personal opinion is still a shame, because my honest opinion on esports is the top 3 esports to watch are 1 fighting games, 2 Rocket League, 3 Counter-Strike. Anything else I watch, I have no idea what's happening. I watch Overwatch, I can't. I watch League, I don't know what's happening. So they have this ease of view. Plus, one thing in fighting games that I think really sets fighting games apart is like personality. Because in fighting games, you're sitting next to your opponents, interactions happen more naturally, and you have plenty of scenes of one player celebrating with the other right next to him, half crying. That creates images that are so strong. All this stuff. So it's this kind of stuff that we have to leverage with sponsors and everything. The main issue is that the numbers not being as big as Rocket League or Counter-Strike, at the end of the day, when you try to get a sponsor, that's the only thing they want is how many viewers do you bring. It's still a bit of this, but usually my main argument for fighting games, and that's, to me, that's my strongest argument, and that's like the thing is, because fighting games are from the arcade and console environments along with PC, it's more inclusive than most other games because, Counter-Strike, PC. Rocket League, even though Rocket League is on console, the esports ecosystem naturally formed itself on PC. So like it creates like this thing. So it kind of kicks out the people who are on console who are a massive part of gaming, like what are console esports right now, like Call of Duty, Gears of War, like quite a few. But what fighting games bring is like, because it comes from there, you have so many like different like people from different background coming, because a console around the world is much more common than a PC. Like I'm Moroccan. No one plays on PC in Morocco. PCs are way too expensive. They all play on console. So you will very rarely see like Moroccans at the top level in everything. If anything, Itachi is the only top Moroccan level player I know in esports. There's one on Valorant who's like okay, but not top. But because of this, right, the community are a bit smaller. When you go to fighting games, you will see people from like countries you don't really see, people from Chile, Brazil.
Yeah, because in Tekken, is it Pakistan? Is a really big community. They got some of the best players in the world.
Yeah, the story of Pakistani Tekken is exactly this. Like in Pakistan, PCs out of the question, way too expensive. PlayStations are still expensive, but what they do is they just like pull money together and buy it together, and then they gather in a place to play together. And they eventually got enough money to traveled out and just beat everyone else in the world. And that's what fighting games like bring to me. What I like, I mean, I'm a football fan. There is nothing better in the entire world in competition than the World Cup. Why? Because it's country against country. You see England against like Argentina, against Brazil, against all that stuff. I love that whole like opposing people from completely different backgrounds to this. I'm really like a fan of this kind of narrative, and fighting games like bring this so much. If you just take the UK, right, at the moment, if I give you like 3 of the top Street Fighter players in the UK, you have Ending Walker, who is kid, 16, started playing on his PC during pandemic, right? Kind of standard esports origin story, I want to say. Then you have Problem X. He came from New York. He played, on console on his own. He eventually like went out to events and broke out into world champion. And then you have Reinhardt. Reinhardt used to be homeless and would literally just have like one, like just like 50p and go to the arcade and put the 50p. And if you lose, you can't play anymore. So he became strong like this. And he went from like that whole like difficult family life where he would escape his difficulties through fighting games to what he is today. But that's because like fighting games are a bit more inclusive. And I think that's why I tried to sponsor as well, is that the variety of profiles and storylines you get on fighting games, there is no other like gaming environment that has this depth of stories and of profiles in players.
Yeah, I really used to enjoy with the Street Fighter community and back in the Gfinity days, got to meet a lot of people through that and just sort of get to know where they came from. There'll be a doctor, there'll be a teacher, there'd be, someone who just works a really normal job, like a management job, finance job, whatever it is. People just had normal lives and then did Street Fighter as a hobby. And then there'll be a few who ascended above that who could be a full-time pro. Sort of like how you'd have in a local football club. You go down on a Saturday or a Sunday and you play football with your mates. Someone will be a builder, be a plumber, all those kind of like traditional jobs. And then they'd get a little bit of money out of football, be like semi-professional. Maybe they'd just get the costs covered if they were good enough. But I think that kind of grassroots journey from I pay to play, I make a little bit of money playing, to I'm a professional, I think fighting game has managed to nail that.
They definitely do. And it's also due to this, right? Like having this whole, I think football is a great example, because as you said, you go play football, your team of 11 can have an engineer, plumber, like a bit of everything. So you actually have a bit of everyone. I mean, my example is the best one, right? One of my best friends in fighting games is Logan. Literally, there is nothing linking me and Logan in life outside of Street Fighter, and we like football. Outside of it, our lives are entirely different. Our beliefs are different. Our hobbies are different. Logan is a DJ. He's really into music. I'm not a music person at all. And despite all this, without Street Fighter, I would have never crossed his path, right? And today we work together every day. We talk to each other every day and stuff. So it's really interesting to see this stuff, because that's what you get with fighting games. Like everyone just gathers just for fighting games. And as you said, Gfinity, Paul Strike is a doctor, Lio is a dance teacher. Like you have so many of these like different things. And then you have Nassim Glow, who's like construction worker. And you just get everyone together, play together, and just like share a great moment. And that's the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, truly beautiful. I guess you mentioned about developers owning the traditional esports titles. I would be crazy to not ask what are your thoughts on Project L and Riot's new fighting game they're planning to release.
It's Project L is an interesting one, right? Because I think everyone in the FGC kind of thinks Project L is gonna like bring fighting games to the next level, and I think what Project L will do for sure is potentially set a new standard / redefine fighting games. But the thing for Project L, and Riot is being very mindful of that, and that's good as well, is that they know that fighting games have a huge like community thing. And if anything, the two head developers from Project L are the people who created EVO, the biggest tournament in the world. They're people who are very in touch with what the community wants and everything. So if Riot plays their card right, they can pretty much be seen as the savior, quote unquote, as in they're finally bringing that higher standard to fighting games. But there is also the trap for them of being too, quote unquote, corporate and just being these, I want to say, soulless. Like, I don't know, it's one of my opinions, but when I watch the Overwatch League, I see soulless. Like, it's a game, it's a great game and everything, but the entire thing is just, they put money, teams put money, it created an environment that's there, and I'm like, where is the hands of the actual people who want to make it work? But outside of this, I think all of us are very excited for Project L, because the game's coming out. There is quite a crossover between fighting games and League of Legends anyway. But the game promises to bring great things even as a game already, like the systems that it's showing and everything. But Riot will bring that heap of experience in esports that the common fighting games developers don't have, because the top fighting games, aside from Mortal Kombat, are all Japan-based. And Japan's esports ecosystem is extremely different. Until 4 years ago, you were legally not allowed to have cash prize in an esports competition in Japan. So they would literally play for honor just to be the champion. There was no money involved or anything. So Riot bringing this is probably going to help set a new standard. So that's already a win. And then if the game is actually good, it can literally become the biggest game easily.
You already mentioned how excited you are for Street Fighter 6. And so I guess there's a few exciting hurdles that could be overcome soon for the fighting game community. And fingers crossed it turns into what the fighting game community deserves, which is something with a little bit more money, but then not forced, not fake, not invested in and overly pushed.
I think it's the thing, like, the fighting games community is very unique in this, which is like, no matter what's happening, if a sponsor is coming and is a slight bit shady, no one watches. Like, the community is very, very attached to like its roots of, we are a community, we welcome everyone, and we welcome everyone who's willing to like be part of the community. So I have seen like multiple times sponsors that I see in football, that I see in other esports, when they came to fighting game, I was like, you guys are shady. I'm not playing with you. There's no way,
Yeah.
It's really interesting to see this. Like, people are very, very attached to the identity of the fighting games community. And obviously it makes it harder to make it grow, but also it makes it grow in a way people like, and that's pretty much what we want.
Well, fingers crossed, Project L, fingers crossed for Street Fighter 6. I'm definitely going to try and get involved in Street Fighter 6 a little bit and tune in and watch. I'm not going to be able to play it because, as you mentioned before, some people either love the fact that they're terrible compared to everyone or they hate it. I'm one of those people who hates being terrible compared to other people. So I didn't want to dedicate my time.
Come play with me. I'll teach you. We'll make a good player of you.
Yeah, good luck. I don't have the time or interest to dedicate to fighting games at that level, but I do love watching it. So I'll be tuning in to see how all the best players take it on, and hopefully get to hear some of your commentary in it. It's been amazing chatting to you about all the fighting game community stuff, about your experience, your journey. As you mentioned, you went from playing fighting games with your family to then being opened up to this world through the local communities, and I think that's something that the whole gaming world could learn from, and I think more local communities hopefully will form post-pandemic. Now we will realize how important it is to be in person. We end the podcast asking the same question to everyone, and that is, what does gaming mean to you?
It's hard to give just one meaning, but it has two different meanings to me. The first one is obviously, a hobby, a passion. Ever since I was a kid, played Zelda, played RPGs, played everything. It's always been my, the fun thing to do. And more importantly, the fun thing to share with people, because, my childhood was playing Zelda, Majora's Mask, and talking to my friends about how to get this mask. playing Pokemon and having all these theories about how to get Mew behind that truck in that thing. Like, you know, that's part of it. Is the whole, like, to me, gaming is the whole thing where you can easily be on your own and enjoy, but at the same time, it creates so many links between you and other players. If I was just playing and not talking to people, I would probably have stopped gaming a long time ago. But the fact that it goes beyond like just what you see on your screen and what you play, that's pretty much what gaming is. And that was the natural end game for me on fighting games, is literally I would travel to meet like-minded people to watch and play fighting games. That's the whole social interactions it creates. That's what gaming is to me.
Amazing. Thank you, Damascus.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.